Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sage's Tabletop Table Talks. I'm Sage, this is my tabletop, and I'm going to talk to you about tabletop role-playing games. I know, if you've seen much of this channel, probably you're going to be like, where does this guy get off talking about comedy? These are the two most unfunny people on the planet. To which I say first, ouch, that's not nice. Fair, but not nice. Secondly, I've never been one to stay in my lane anyway. So let's talk about what does and doesn't make for a good shaky table comedy tabletop role playing game. I want to reference. This is also kind of a little bit going to be a review of Human Occupied Landfill, because although I haven't played it, I'll kind of get into why this is also why I feel okay somewhat reviewing it. As for my rules, I won't review a game I haven't actually played, but I feel like Human Occupied Landfill is a perfect example of kind of everything done wrong about a comedy tabletop role playing game. And we'll just drop off on the first thing about making a comedy tabletop role playing game. That is, you have to remember you're designing a game. This comedy is made with the expectation that people are going to sit down and actually play your game. And Human Occupied Landfill is almost an unplayable. Nah, no, it is. It is just an unplayable mess. The rules just aren't there. The game actively tells the DM to just ignore the rules and just constantly make the players fail for no reason. And from an idea of kind of just being a Jelly, come on, parody of tabletop role-playing games, I see that because there is a lot of advice, and especially tabletop role-playing games from the 90s, as well as games that fall under the OSR umbrella, that basically just tell the DM to constantly fuck the players over. So, things like, if the player tries to seduce the barmaid, force them to roll to see if they catch an STD. Which, okay, I mean, I somewhat get that, but it is basically just player wants to do something. You punish the player for their course of action. Or, something like the player is going to roll diplomacy to see if he can convince the king to turn over his kingdom. My advice is just tell the player no. Just don't even roll. There's no rule that can actually let you do that. Old school advice would be, let the player do that. The king will have him summarily executed. So, I get it from that kind of standpoint of constantly fuck the players over, but also, most people who play TTRPGs, even ones who are part of the OSR who claim to find it fun, most of them don't actually find it fun to just constantly be dicked over no matter what choice you make, because it creates this state where you can't move forward until the DM decides he's done fucking with you. But that's advice for another day. But one of the other things about Human Occupied Landfill is you're supposed to remember that you're writing a book someone's expected to read, and this isn't something that's specific to Human Occupied Landfill, but it is something that you don't see a lot in comedy games, except in Human Occupied Landfill. But I want to bring it up anyway. Human Occupied Landfill is entirely handwritten. Basically, it was just written by hand with a pen, and then kind of like photocopied. Which makes the whole damn thing almost unreadable. And by all means, read Human Occupied Landfill. Don't try to play it, but by God, try to read it, because it is something else. It is a whole nother beast of its own. Like I said, the whole thing is, and they'll make mistakes and they'll just scribble. You'll see where they scribbled it out and wrote something else. But yeah, most of this advice just really does come down to remember that you're trying to create a game that people are supposed to play. One of the other things to kind of consider when it comes to comedy games is you're writing a game and you're not just telling your failed stand-up. And one of the things that kind of somewhat entails is too many jokes in the book. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this also kind of comes down to readability. Like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Unisystem game, the whole thing's written in this desperate attempt to copy Joss Whedon's writing. And if we're being completely honest, Joss Whedon can't even copy Joss Whedon's writing that well very often. Like, I get it, Buffy's awesome, but like, if you kind of keep going deeper and deeper into his writings, like I'm sorry, I know Firefly's this big, like, held up on like this high esteem as this amazing thing that was, taken from us before our time, but the writing really isn't that good. It is just more fucking Buffy shit. Cabin in the Woods is just more fucking Buffy shit. It is tedious. And that's when Joss Whedon's actually writing Joss Whedon trash. Now imagine some clown who is just not that clever, trying desperately hard to mimic Joss Whedon's writing, and it gets old. One of my favorite things from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer RPG, the Unisystem one, is they're like, you notice you'll need all kinds of weird dice. What are these? Well, if you need some dice, you can get them from various kind of board game stores, or pop open that Pop-O-Matic bubble from your copy of Trouble. The Unisystem uses D10s, like exclusively uses D10s. The Pop-O-Matic bubbles use D6s. So you'll pop open your Pop-O-Matic bubble, break your game of Trouble, Trouble. You'll break your game of Trouble, pull out those 6-sided dice, only to find out that those aren't the dice that you need. You need 10-siders in order to play a Unisystem game. And I'm like, and it's a perfect example of this kind of idea of writing your game in this constant jokey tone. That's kind of a point I'm making is you you can absolutely overdo the comedic tone in your comedic game. It's like trying to make a joke about, oh, you can just get them out of your Pop-O-Matic bubble, and then it's like, okay, but like did you were writing this and then just completely forgot, completely ignored, completely removed this idea that, wait, no, that won't work because those kind of dice are not the kind of dice that we use. Boy, howdy, you have to make some Pop-O-Matic bubble joke because Pop-O-Matic bubble would be the kind of thing that Joss Whedon would reference. And as much as I hold Paranoia up in this kind of exalt, because I think Paranoia, especially the 4th edition, which is, no, 7th. Man, I don't remember which edition I played. I don't think it's 4th edition. It might be 7th. I don't remember. But anyway, the Paranoia is one I'll kind of hold up as an actual well-designed comedy RPG. It does fall into this thing of where it's got this constant jokey tone. The whole thing is very much written in character, meaning that there's things that's like, oh, this rule? Well, that rule is above your security clearance, clone. Continue to ask about it and report for termination. And, I mean, like I said, Paranoia is a good comparison, because, like, the rules in Paranoia, they're not perfect, but the game is, at its heart, designed to be a functional game that people can sit down and actually play. Well, it's like, okay, so, how's the game system work? Well, easy. You've got a target number. You'll take your skill. You'll roll a d10, add your d10 to the skill, and you will see if you succeed. It does do that thing where it kind of is like, oh, but sometimes fuck the players over for no reason to fuck them over. But at the same time, Paranoia also be like, but don't do it too often, because if the players constantly fail, they won't even try anything. And if they don't try anything to fail, it won't be very funny. Like I said, Paranoia is not perfect, but like I said, it's a functional game. And it does do that kind of constant jokey tone that can get very, very old to read. Luckily, Paranoia is only like 50 pages long. Um, but yeah, that's one of the things is like you get to a point where you're reading and it's in this constant tone. You're reading the handwritten, or you have to read the 77th fucking failed stand-up line from this failed comedic guy, and it gets to the point where you just kind of have to you glaze over, you stop paying attention, your mind just kind of falters on it, and you're not actually picking anything up. Once again, you're designing a game more than you are trying to write for, more than you are doing an audition for a writer's room on a TV sitcom. And on that note, like I said, honestly, we'll just talk about some really bad comedic mechanics. Human occupied landfill is another perfect example of this. So when you make a character in human occupied landfill, you roll on like a mutations table, like a D100, it might be a D1000, because human occupied landfill was a desperate attempt to be edgy. It was a White Wolf game in the late 90s, written to be edgier than a normal White Wolf game. So, yeah, no. In the 90s, White Wolf games were a little edgy. They've kind of settled more into just kind of a generic, boring emo slog now. White Wolf games, instead of now being that kid who's telling like extremely violent racist jokes, and he's not even really racist, he's just doing it because he knows it's going to get a rise out of people. That was kind of where White Wolf was going in the late 90s. Now with just kind of, it's just really, really sad, and it's just standing in the corner smoking a cigarette looking at its feet. That's where White Wolf kind of is now. I guess technically Onyx Path, because White Wolf got on it. What, Onyx Road? It's Onyx Road or it doesn't fucking matter. Nobody gives a fuck about that anyway. Yeah, nobody actually plays White Wolf games. They just take the world of Vampire the Masquerade and use it as an excuse to dress in all black and stand around in abandoned buildings smoking cigarettes. Probably vaping now. The White Wolf. If White Wolf was a person, it absolutely vapes without question. Anyway, yeah. So, Human Occupied Landfill was like hyper edgy for its time. Like it was trying to parody how edgy White Wolf games were by being edgier. One of the things you do is you roll a mutations chart. So, you roll, let's say, D1000, or D100, whatever it was. Like, what's your mutation? You might get, a lot of it would be like, oh, you're mentally R-worded. Lose 1d6 intelligence points. You're limp-wristed. Lose 1d4 strength. I think the game was entirely d6s. 1d6 strength points. And there was a bunch of shit on there that would be like, you have a brain tumor. Your character's dead. Your heart explodes. Your character's dead. You are extremely unlucky. You get hit by lightning and your character's dead. You're very unlucky. You walk out in the traffic and get run over. Your character's dead. And there's just a bunch of those. And it's like, man, how many of these things end up with your... And I get it because older editions of Traveler did something very similar, where they you would have what's called the life path system. So you would be like, okay, my character just graduated the academy. And then you roll some dice and you see what happens. And sometimes your character will die. And that was a stupid fucking mechanic. And so, like, I guess that was the idea. They're trying to parody the Traveler life path system. But a bad mechanic is a bad mechanic. Once again, and and they're like, no, you only get 3 shots at creating a character, and it's very, very likely in those 3 shots you'll just end up with 3 characters who die immediately. So does that mean I'm lucky and I don't have to play this trash anymore? Because if so, thank you. But very much kind of this idea is like, okay, they're forgetting that their stupid fucking mechanic is actually one that's supposed to be played. Like I said, I think it was a dumb mechanic when Traveler did it. I love Traveler's life path system, and I think that it's interesting because the life path system very much has this kind of push your luck mechanic, where you're like, okay, I spent 3 years out of the academy, roll to see what happens, and then you can kind of keep attempting to roll, be like, okay, I am going to roll again, make my character a year older and roll again to see what happens in this year. And you might get some extra money, you might get some extra skill points, but you also might have bad things happen to you where things like your character gets sick and loses some, or gets into loses some like stamina points, or your character might have a bad financial situation and lose some money. So like it's very much this thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to push my luck and see if I can make my character better, or you can take what you already have and not risk it. And I don't know, it's a cool system. Human occupied landfill just has you roll some mutations, and there's a decent probability your character just end up either dead or completely unplayable. Because once again, you're and fuck, paranoia doesn't actually do that, surprisingly. I would think for sure that there would be like a high probability that you would end up with one of your clones already marked off, but there actually really isn't. Unless you're during character creation, you, the player, are acting completely out of line, then there's actually almost no chance that you're gonna build a character who starts dead. One of the things about paranoia over human occupied landfill is human occupied landfill. If your character dies, your character dies. In paranoia, you're a vat grown clone. So if you die, they just pop out another clone of you. So that's kind of one of the things is like having your character die in an absolutely stupid way doesn't mean you've got to rebuild a character from scratch. It just means you have what they call a six pack. Basically, you have 6 lives, and you mark one off, and you just pop your character out and keep going. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's one of those things where it's kind of a dumb mechanic. And most importantly, when you're designing a comedy role playing game, this is something I kind of go, leave room in your game for players to tell jokes. Human occupied landfill basically constantly bombards you with jokes. Even something like, actually, I'll go ahead and do it because I already talked about. There's actually one more thing to talk about, which is a mechanical thing. But Toon's another great example. It gives you the tools to be humorous. Your characters are Looney Tunes characters. The game's like, okay, your characters have a couple stats. Here are some skills. Here are some abilities. Go and have Looney Tunes. Oh, did your character have an anvil fall and lose all of his hit points? Set an egg timer for 60 seconds. That player, leaves is bonked. He's laying there with stars swirling around his head. Set an egg timer for 60 seconds. That player walks away, which is, a good time to get up. Just stretch. 60 seconds is a good time because if you make the player sit out for 15 minutes, they're going to stop playing the game and they are going to start playing Candy Crush. Which I've seen other games do, like injury mechanics where you have to sit out for like extended periods of time. Prime Directive makes you like send a player home and read pages out of a dictionary, which no one's going to do. But yeah, the thing is, doing shit like that, players leave the game. 60 seconds is basically enough time for them to kind of get up, stretch, they use the bathroom, they get a Coke and a slice of pizza, sit back down, and bam, they're back in the action. And they are ready to, hit a mouse with a rubber mallet, or, they're going to drop a piano on another player. Very Looney Tunes kind of shit. Very Tom and Jerry kind of shit. And the game very, very much tries to make the mechanics fit the feeling. So, like I said, 60 seconds, if you lose all your hit points to basically get up and use the bathroom, means that the mechanics encourage the players to put their characters at risk. You can't die in Toon. It doesn't matter how much TNT is strapped to your character. It doesn't matter how far that cliff is to the ground. Your character can't die. What happens is you have enough time to go use the bathroom, or, just get up and kind of take a quick walk and stretch your legs. It makes players want to do dumb shit. Because let's be honest, if there is if there's a bomb ticking in Dungeons and Dragons or Shadowrun or something like that, players will be very cautious. They're going to spend a lot of time messing with it, because if that bomb goes off and their character dies, they lose a character. They very, very much have to, build a new character from scratch. There's a huge time investment. There's a huge actual because one of the things people don't talk about, I mean, they do, but people who don't play don't realize how much of an emotional investment you really get in characters. When you build these characters, you give them backstories, you give them families, you give them a life. And when they die, it is actually very hard to see them go. But in Toon, since you can't die, if there's, a stick of dynamite pounding down, it is very much in line for your character to just ignore. It's like, oh, he thinks, he picks up the cigar, but it's actually a stick of dynamite. And even though your player hears that, it very much encourages you, the player, to play it off like a cartoon character, where you're trying to puff on the stick of dynamite till it explodes in your face. It explodes in your face. Okay, I set my timer for 60 seconds. Hey guys, I'm going to go check my phone real quick to see if there's any messages. You go outside, go on the front porch, check your phone to see if your wife texted you. You come back. You got like 15, 20 seconds before you're back in the action. So the game encourages you to do dumb shit to be funny. A game like Human Occupied, even to a lesser extent, Paranoia does that, because you can, if your clone dies, you just pop out another clone. And some editions actually tell the DM to, reward a player for that shit. If a player, heroically throws themselves on a bomb, even if the bomb wouldn't have actually hurt anybody, but it still does get them, give them some merit points. Give them some, bennies, some kind of benefit, because if a player is doing something that's making the game a comedy game, if you're playing a comedy game and a player is doing something that makes everybody at the table laugh, then you should reward them, because they're playing in character. They are effectively, properly role-playing. But a game like Human Occupied Landfill, if your character dies, you just got to go through this miserable process of building a character and rolling mutations, and then your character dies, and building another character, and rolling some mutations, and oh shit, that character dies, and building another character. Oh, you got 3 mental penalties. Your character has -5 intelligence. Oh, well, that character can't actually function, literally can't function, because his intelligence is too low, and you gotta make another, and it's a miserable experience if a character does something funny to get back in the game. And like I said, one of the big things to kind of consider is also, writing all the jokes in the game you can write. Human Occupied Landfill, once again, every possible joke you can conceive of. There's like 100 mutations, and there's just 100 jokes, and a lot of them are about like, you know, mental health issues. Which honestly, I'm one of those people who kind of doesn't think it's that big a deal to joke about it, because like I feel like there's irreverence to, you can disarm a lot of that pain with irreverence, to me personally. I also understand people who don't want to joke about it, and that's okay. That's why lines and veils exist in the system. Be like, look, I'm really not okay with joking about depression or joking about neurodivergency, and like, okay, so we won't. Um, as someone who's neurodivergent, I don't find joking. I find joking about it to be disarming. It makes it feel less like a lodestone that kind of holds you down, and it feels more like just a thing that is part of you. And since it's part of you, you can kind of helps to joke about it, kind of laugh about it. It defangs it, kind of, to me personally. But I also get it, and it's one of the big problems with comedy in general, not just comedy games, is there are things that are heavily taboo for some people, but there it is also very cathartic for some people. Like I said, like mental health issues is a big one. Some people find humor revolving around mental health issues like, depression, psychosis, neurodivergency, to be something that is almost triggering for them. And then some people, like myself, find it something that is joking about it disarming, and it kind of helps it feel less like this constant thing that everybody judges you for, and it feels more like just this kind of silly quirk that doesn't actually have any power over you. So you have to be very careful in writing. And honestly, if you're writing a comedy game, it is probably very good to put those kind of trigger warnings out. Anyway, kind of off topic, but back to what I was saying, one of the big things you also don't want to do is you don't want to write every single joke you can write. Human Occupied Landfill has all these jokes about, mental health, but it's also got these pre-generated characters, and one of them is a priest who has the ability to summon young boys to his side. Because get it? Priests molest young boys. See, isn't that funny? Yeah. What that means is, if, once again, kind of, Human Occupied Landfill is an edgy game. If you're playing it, you're probably into edgy humor. If you're somebody who's not into edgy humor, then you should just not play an edgy game. Like, the game is very upfront about what it is. It's edgy, it's stupid, it's in your face, it's kind of mean-spirited, and it's written for that. It's not really written for a general population. And that is one of the very few positive things I'll say about Human Occupied Landfill. And it just tells you straight up, like, look, this game is super fucking edgy. It is 100% reliant on mean-spirited and edgy humor. If that's not your thing, put the book down and go play something else. And not even like very rare, not even kind of you two can't handle it. They're just like, nah, this game is what it is, and if you don't want to play it, that's okay. There's 20,000 fucking games on the market to play that isn't Human Occupied Landfill. But like I said, the thing with Human Occupied Landfill is every single joke you can possibly tell is already in the book. The skills are things like gun use, big gun use, bigger gun use. Holy fuck, how big is that gun use? Oh my god, that's the biggest gun and like, you're never going to use those skills. You're never going to call those skills that. You're never going to say, I use my swing a big pointy thing and stick into the other guy's head skill. No, you're going to use melee. You're like, I'm going to use my sword skill on a guy. Because that joke is funny once when you're reading the book. If that. If that. But a joke like that, if you find it funny, you're not going to find it funny the fourth, fifth, sixth time you use it. You're just going to, I use my melee skill. And it's going to even be less funny when the DM insists upon the joke. What skill you use? I use my swing my pointy thing at the other guy's head and make him go ouch skill. Once again, paranoia. Skills are like melee, energy weapons. If you want to tell that joke, you can be like, oh, I'm gonna use my melee skill. Okay, I'm gonna use my melee. I'm gonna take this bit of metal and whap a dude upside the head with it. And if your group thinks it's funny when you say that the first time, okay. And if you try to use it 2-3 times and you say it the second time, the third time, and it's not funny anymore, you're just gonna drop the joke because it's not funny. Once the joke stops being funny, it's no longer worth telling. The problem with a lot of these games is these jokes, even if they are funny, are going to be told to the point they are no longer funny. That's a problem I had when I was playing. My gaming group was playing Cards Against Humanity like every week, and it got to the point where no matter what card anybody played, I wasn't laughing. I was just like, okay, I play this card, and I'd flip over all the white cards, and I'd be like, I guess that one's the best. It wasn't funny anymore because like I said, we were playing so often. All the jokes, I was playing so often with the same group of people, all the jokes that could be told with the game were no longer funny because I'd heard them all so often before. And that's kind of the problem with writing your game with a joke like, instead of melee, whap dude with piece of metal. It's like, yeah, I do that. I that's a joke I commonly make is, what is this skill? Well, this skill lets me whap a dude with a sharpened piece of metal. I make this joke on the tabletops all the time. You don't want to hear it 17 times a night when playing. Like, that's just it. If I was gonna make a comedy RPG, I probably wouldn't make that joke. But that's kind of the thing, is when you're designing a comedy RPG, is a game like Paranoia and Toon give you a world, a setting for you to make your jokes in. Games like and Tales from the Floating Vagabond, the first edition of Tales from the Floating Vagabond, and like Human Occupied Landfill, and to a lesser extent Buffy the Vampire Slayer Unisystem. They tell all the jokes that there are. As many, the games are so filled with jokes, they tell them as many as they can in the book, and it doesn't leave a lot of shoulder room. It doesn't leave a lot of breathing room for players to make their own jokes. So, I mean, yeah, I guess that's kind of is. If you're going to design a comedy role-playing game, just remember, you want the setting and the world to be funny, and you want your mechanics to encourage players to be funny, but you don't want your mechanics to force players into making the joke you found funny the first time you wrote it. And a good thing is, if there's a joke in the book, read it. Read it again. Read it again. Read it again. Are you still laughing? Maybe I don't know, but if you stop laughing after the third or fourth read, it's not going to be a funny joke for the game. Maybe take it out. Like I said, get and encourage players to be funny. And one of the big things to do with that is, you don't want to, like Human Occupied Landfill, it wants you to force the players to fail. It wants you to create a situation where players have no choice but to fail. That's not as funny as creating a situation where players want to fail. like I said, paranoia to a lesser extent, and especially later editions of paranoia. And toon create situations where the fail state is what you want. You don't want to just constantly fail, but the games absolutely create a state where failing, especially failing in some spectacular, amazing, and stupid way, is encouraged by the system. Players want to chase the Roadrunner off a cliff. Players want to try to swallow a bomb because you don't have enough time to defuse it in toon. Players want to, rush headlong into laser fire, for friend computer, even though there actually isn't any laser fire. It's just a single malfunctioning cleaning bot. It encourages players to want to run headfirst into the malfunctioning cleaning bot in order to stop it for friend computer. You create a situation where players want to be funny instead of a situation where players have to repeat your failed stand-up. But anyway, that's kind of all I got for today. I modified it a little bit, but yeah, this was a suggestion from the other guy on this channel, Fox. But I mean, if you guys can think of any tabletop role-playing game topics you'd like me to cover, by all means, leave them in the comments. As always, you can support what I do here. I'll leave my Cash App and my PayPal in the comments. I don't have a Patreon because I don't want obligations for people to pay. If you just want to throw $5 my way, I appreciate it. If not, whatever. I do this for free. I've been doing this for free for over a year now, and I'll keep doing it for free. I got a full-time job. It's all good. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.